Insulting me is a badge of honor for me, but I think we all know, as both as an educator for a couple decades and as a parent, using that term is just so damaging. It's hurtful. We have fought 3 decades to get this out of our schools. Kids know better than to use it. But look, this is what Donald Trump has done.
Is happening. I just don't think that you need to go the extra mile and make a claim as extreme as they're funding a terrorist group in Somalia until you have the goods, until you can actually prove that's happening. And let's also keep in mind that the U.S. government does a good enough job stealing our money to fund foreign terror groups as it is. So maybe there should be some ire directed toward the U.S.
A political commentator has sparked a major online debate by directly challenging a public figure over allegations of financial misconduct. Commentator Anna Kasparian's confrontation with Tim Walz, centered on a reported scandal involving Somali-related funds, has gone viral. Kasparian presented evidence and offered sharp criticism, creating a contentious exchange. The interaction showed existing narratives being quickly questioned and defenses appearing to weaken under scrutiny. The widespread reaction poses a significant question: whether this marks a defining rebuttal or the start of a broader controversy. The incident demonstrates how intense public.
Minnesota in particular.
At first it was Minnesota, but then it was later reported.
It's all 50 states?
All 50 states, they have to provide evidence that,
Oh, I didn't realize that he brought it in.
Yeah, so basically law-abiding,
okay, maybe
child
that's a little bit overboard. I thought it was 100%. Just that state.
Yeah, that is overboard. I want to be clear about something. Due to the massive amount of COVID aid that flowed into states across the country, fraud has been a problem, not just in Minnesota, but all across the country. In fact,
a prominent political commentator's pointed critique is drawing significant online attention tonight. The exchange began when commentator Anna Kasparian directly addressed Tim Walz. Observers note the discussion shifted rapidly from standard analysis to a highly methodical and pointed rebuttal. Kasparian employed detailed context and sharp irony during the segment. The confrontation has since sparked widespread discussion across social media platforms.
Off of something that broke earlier this year in November, there was a huge story that was published in the New York Times about fraud cases in the Minneapolis area. And most of these, nonprofits or these little businesses that were popping up and basically benefiting from COVID era public money were Somali owned. Now, 2 things are happening at the same time. On one hand, these fraud cases appear to be very serious and very real.
This exchange did not follow the format of a traditional debate with mutual rebuttal. It unfolded as a one-sided critique where Anna Kasparian systematically challenged the foundation of Tim Walz's position. Kasparian assumed control of the narrative, directly confronting and deconstructing his key statements. Her analysis left little room for the standard political defenses, applying sustained pressure to the credibility of his explanations.
Here, just another day. Okay, so a YouTuber named Nick Shirley uncovered tens of, arguably, even he claims $100 million of fraud in Minnesota under Governor Tim Walz's.
The online exchange captured a stark contrast in presentation. Tim Walz entered the discussion projecting an image of conventional, heartland leadership. His demeanor was that of a politician accustomed to discussing local, community-focused issues. This established persona then became a central point of contention in the unfolding debate.
Bad faith actors who might be using this for terrible political purposes, the fact remains that it appears that close to $9 billion, according to prosecutors, have been stolen from taxpayers in the Minneapolis area as a result of these fraudulent businesses. And I want to give you more details about it in just a second, but before I do, Cenk, your 2 cents.
Tonight, a viral political confrontation highlights the power of direct questioning. Commentator Anna Kasparian has challenged the public image of figure Tim Walz, pushing past his established persona to address serious allegations. Kasparian focused the debate directly on the reported Somali fraud scandal, presenting it as a central, unresolved issue. Throughout the exchange, she employed a methodical use of evidence and pointed rhetoric. Kasparian maintained a calm delivery, allowing the presentation of facts and pointed criticism to drive the challenge to Walz's assertions. His repeated assurances of control were met with sustained scrutiny over the specific allegations.
Under the assumption, and this was, I guess, a terrible assumption to have because it's not true, that there would be a recalibration of some of these policies in order to actually serve the best interests of the American people. But what I've noticed, certainly on a local level, is that there's absolutely no self-reflection, no recalibration of said policies. And on a national level, there seems to be more interest in serving the egos and, the narcissism of Democratic leaders.
In the ongoing online debate, the use of technical language itself has become a focal point. Analyst Anna Kasparian has challenged Tim Walz's reliance on bureaucratic terminology and procedural explanations. Kasparian methodically questioned whether such complex language was clarifying the situation or obscuring core accountability regarding the fraud allegations. She highlighted a growing contrast between Walz's established public image of direct authority and the increasingly abstract nature of his current explanations. Kasparian's critique focused on the perception that each new administrative detail raised further questions rather than providing resolution. The analysis presented Walz not as a deliberate obstructionist, but as a figure whose standard political defenses appeared inadequate under sustained scrutiny over a serious matter.
Emphasize childcare centers where Shirley shows up during weekday business hours to find that there are actually no children present. There are also some pretty extreme claims that we need more evidence for, which I'll get into in just a second. So a claim was just kind of casually made about how this money is then being siphoned off and sent over to Al-Shabaab, a terrorist group that operates out of Somalia. Now, there hasn't been any evidence provided.
The analyst at the center of this viral exchange has issued a pointed clarification of her focus. Anna Kasparian emphasized that her critique is not directed at the Somali community, but rather at what she describes as systemic failures in oversight and political accountability. Kasparian argued the community itself is adversely affected by these alleged administrative shortcomings. She shifted the discussion to Tim Walz's broader gubernatorial record, framing his established reputation for steady crisis leadership in sharp contrast to the current controversy. The core of her argument questions the consistency of his accountability, suggesting true leadership is tested when direct problems arise. Kasparian also critiqued the surrounding media coverage of the scandal, characterizing some reporting as overly cautious and more aligned with reputation management than rigorous journalism. She highlighted what she sees as a pattern of selective engagement with the allegations.
The Department of Health and Human Services has decided to effectively punish all child care centers in the state of Minnesota by halting federal child care payments toward the state. And of course, this is over allegations that some of these child care centers are engaging in fraud. Now, Deputy HHS Secretary Jim O'Neill said in a post on X that funds will be released only when states prove they are being spent.
In his response, Tim Walz's statements have been characterized by extreme caution and legal precision. Analyst Anna Kasparian challenged this approach, arguing such language avoids definitive answers and clear accountability. She scrutinized his repeated references to ongoing investigations and administrative reviews, suggesting they may function to defer public scrutiny. Kasparian then framed the core issue as one of political trust, contending that value erodes through a pattern of ambiguous statements and perceived evasiveness. Her critique extended to Walz's broader governance record, contrasting his past commitments to ethics and accountability with his current handling of the fraud allegations. Kasparian presented this not as a direct accusation, but as a highlighting of apparent inconsistencies, using his own previously stated standards as a benchmark for the present controversy.
Over and over again, you'll see them go visit various childcare facilities, and you'll see that there's no one there. There are no children, and sometimes they'll find workers there, and they'll ask some questions. The workers are very evasive, and I should note that while yes, it is true that prosecutors have already been investigating similar fraud cases in the area, and there have already been arrests. What's important to know about the businesses that were visited by Shirley and David here, we're still receiving.
Throughout the analysis, the unresolved fraud scandal remained the central focus. Commentator Anna Kasparian repeatedly returned to the allegations, framing them as an enduring issue demanding direct answers. She challenged the notion that public skepticism constitutes hostility, instead presenting it as a fundamental expectation of public officials. Kasparian characterized Tim Walz's defensive posture as a misalignment with the basic requirements of accountability. Her methodical critique, underscored by pointed irony, shifted toward a broader political observation. She suggested that while a single controversy may not end a career, the persistent mishandling of scrutiny can cause lasting damage. The segment concluded by presenting Walz as politically diminished, not by a definitive judgment, but by what was portrayed as a sustained failure to provide clear, direct responses to serious questions.
Indicating that certain requirements would need to be met before federal grants are approved for childcare programs in all states, not just Minnesota. With that in mind, let's take a look at what he had to say.
I have activated our Defend the Spend system for all ACF childcare payments across America. Starting today, we require a justification, receipt, or photo evidence before we make a payment. Second, I've just signed and sent a demand letter to Governor Walz. I required a full 360 review.
The segment has concluded, leaving viewers with a pointed examination of political accountability. Analyst Anna Kasparian's critique systematically challenged the use of official stature and past achievements as a shield from current scrutiny. She framed the high office not as protection, but as a position that magnifies the significance of unresolved questions. Throughout, Kasparian redirected the discussion from stated intentions to tangible consequences and actions. She portrayed the repeated reliance on promises of future reviews and audits as a tactic that substitutes process for resolution, potentially diminishing public trust. The broader implication presented was that political credibility erodes not through a single dramatic event, but through a sustained pattern of evasive responses. The analysis suggested such an approach can generate a lasting skepticism that persists well beyond the immediate news cycle, potentially affecting all future public statements and policy initiatives.
Of the Minnesota Department of Children, Youth, and Families said none of the 10 childcare centers that YouTuber Nick Shirley recently visited for his viral video had their payments paused, although a couple were previously closed down by the state, and state workers are doing visits to the rest today. So these facilities, even though there was prior knowledge by the state that there was fraud going on, these facilities were still receiving these government grants.
The commentary escalated with a direct comparison between political accountability and public expectation. Analyst Anna Kasparian contrasted the swift consequences average citizens face for errors with what she characterized as a more lenient, process-driven response for officials. She suggested this perceived imbalance indicates accountability diminishes near positions of power. Kasparian then questioned Tim Walz's maintained demeanor of calm authority, framing it not as assurance but as a form of detachment from direct responsibility. Her critique challenged the political notion that merely enduring a scandal equates to resolving it. Kasparian argued that surviving controversy does not erase underlying questions, which can persist indefinitely. The analysis concluded that while Walz remains in office, his political standing now operates under a sustained cloud of unresolved allegations.
Unclear what he means by the photo evidence. Like, what is that going to prove? He says upon receipt of payment. What do you want a photo of? Do you want photos of children at the daycare centers? I don't know. There was a lack of clarity there. I personally don't have any problem whatsoever with increased oversight of how public money is being spent, because it is true that fraud is a problem, not just in Minnesota, but fraud has been a huge problem in many states, as I've mentioned, California being one of them, because there was this massive infusion of COVID-era money from the federal government to the states in order to keep people whole as, shutdowns were taking place and people were losing their jobs. That's always going to, unfortunately...
The analysis concluded by examining the significance of what was left unsaid. Commentator Anna Kasparian treated strategic omissions as meaningful, arguing that avoided specifics can be as revealing as repeated talking points. She framed Tim Walz's reluctance to address details not as an unavoidable constraint, but as a deliberate choice with political consequences. Kasparian's central thesis presented true leadership as the proactive confrontation of errors before they erode public confidence. She characterized Walz's handling of the fraud allegations as a case study in prioritizing image preservation over transparent accountability. While the segment employed pointed criticism, it concluded without a definitive resolution, mirroring the ongoing nature of the controversy itself. The final assessment left Walz in a precarious position, where traditional political charisma appeared insufficient against sustained factual scrutiny. The overarching message was that evasive communication tactics are never without consequence when the fundamental issue is the preservation of public trust.